I never expected that rescuing a beaten mother and her child would change my life forever. I remember the exact moment when everything took a terrifying turn. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind of day that makes the whole world feel gray. I was just walking home from work when I heard the yelling. It was sharp, laced with panic. My heart raced. Something was off. I could feel it deep in my bones. There, in a shadowy alley, time seemed to freeze. A woman, her face a canvas of bruises, clutched a child against her, cradling him like he was the last bit of hope in her world. Her eyes, wide and pleading, gleamed like they were screaming for help. The child was trembling, eyes like saucers, frozen in fear. My breath hitched in my throat. I had to do something that I stepped forward, each footfall echoing like thunder in the silent street. The woman's sobs cut through the dark, pulling at a part of me I didn't know existed. I called out, my voice shaking, "It's okay. I'm here to help." The words barely left my mouth before her assailant turned, his expression twisted in rage. I could feel the blood draining from my face as he advanced, hands clenched into fists, a silent promise of violence. My heart thundered in my chest. I could almost taste the fear on my tongue. In that instant, it was as if the world around us morphed, the shadows deepening. The alley closed in, the brick walls towering over me like silent witnesses. I remember the smell of rain mixing with the metallic tang of fear, each breath coming heavier as the scene unfolded. I felt small and utterly powerless. I could see the hurt etched into the woman's very soul, echoed in the child's terrified eyes. But as the confrontation escalated, something shifted. A blinding burst of courage ignited within me. I couldn't just stand there. I had to act. I yelled, louder this time, "Leave them alone." It was a desperate attempt to shield them. The thug paused, glancing between us with a mixture of surprise and amusement, his sneer wide and cruel. Then, in a swift motion, the mother lunged. She pushed the child behind her, a primal instinct to protect. Her courage was palpable, electric. I felt the urge to marsh my rage, my determination mounting. For every bruise painted across her skin, for every whimper escaping from the small boy, I was ready to fight. But just as I thought I could intervene, the world tilted. A piercing siren wailed in the distance, cutting through the intense silence and flipping my heart like a coin. The thug's expression morphed from fury to panic, and he vanquished like smoke, slipping into the darkness. I was left standing there, breathless, with the mother and her child before me, tangled in a web of fear and hope. The silence that followed was deafening. I approached them cautiously, my hands trembling, heart racing. "Are you okay?" I whispered, the weight of the moment crashing down on us. The mother didn't respond. She only stared. And then I heard it, soft and fragile, the child's whimper. "Please," I begged, desperately seeking some sign of life from their tiny world. "I can help you." But would they trust me? Would anyone? I felt a lump rise in my throat, an unfamiliar fear creeping in. And just as I thought I could breathe again, the mother's eyes flooded with something I had never seen before. Was it gratitude or terror? Her lips parted, but instead of words, silence hung heavy in the air. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The days that followed felt like an indistinct haze, a swirling blend of anxiety and hope. I kept thinking about the mother and her child, about their haunted eyes, and the way they clung to each other in that dark alley. It seemed impossible that I could be a catalyst in their lives, yet I yearned to reach out, to ensure they were safe. But the weight of my own uncertainty pressed heavily on my chest that I returned to that alley day after day, convinced that if I just waited long enough, I would see them again. The city unfurled around me like the pages of an ominous book, each face in the crowd a reminder of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. I was now a ghost lingering in the shadows, drawn to the past, but unable to escape my own reality. One afternoon, after yet another fruitless visit, I leaned against the alley wall, feeling the bile of guilt rise in my throat. I wrestled with myself. What if I had miscalculated? What if they thought I was just another stranger wanting to do harm? Just as self-doubt threatened to consume me, I heard the soft sound of a tiny voice behind me. Are you the one who saved us? I turned quickly, heart racing, and there stood the little boy, clutching the worn teddy bear he must have carried for comfort. The mother was close behind, her expression still wary but softer, not entirely trusting but touched with a flicker of something like hope. Yes, I managed to croak, emotions swirling wildly. I'm so glad to see you. The boy took a cautious step closer, his small face filled with a mix of admiration and fear. Mommy says you helped us. She says you were brave. Their gaze fell on the cut on my palm, a reminder of the night I had stepped into danger. It sliced deeper than flesh. It's just a little scratch, I said, hiding the tremor in my voice. I'm more worried about you too. Are you safe? The mother finally spoke, her voice a whisper laced with caution. We've been staying at a shelter. It's different, but we're together, and that's what matters. Her watery eyes met mine, searching for understanding that a tangle of emotions surged within me, relief that they were alive, but dread for their current circumstances. Together, I echoed. That's incredibly brave. As we spoke, I felt a warmth bloom inside me, a fragile connection weaving between our fractured lives. The boy dared to move closer to me, lowering his voice. Are you my friend now? He asked, and my heart nearly shattered under the weight of his innocence. Before I could answer, the mother suddenly gripped his shoulder tightly, her face paling. We can't stay too long. Please, you mustn't say anything about us. It's not safe. Her words cast a dark shadow over our fragile reunion, reminding us all of the danger that still lurked just outside the boundaries of our fleeting hope. That I promise, I replied quickly, perhaps too desperately. I just want to help. That's when I made a decision. Whatever fear twisted within me, I couldn't let it paralyze my resolve. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. There's a community center nearby. They help people like you. You can go there and talk to someone. I watched as the mother's brow furrowed, hesitation darting across her features. I don't know if we can trust anyone, she replied, her voice quaking. But the little boy's hand slipped into hers, squeezing with a determined grip. Mommy, please. I want to go somewhere safe, he urged, his youthful insistence challenging the walls she had built for their protection. An unexpected spark of determination ignited within the mother's eyes. If you're willing to help us find this place, absolutely, I urged. I'll go with you. I promise I'll be okay. For a moment, we stood together in the bitter quiet of the alley, the three of us forged in a fragile alliance against an uncertain world. Just as we turned to leave, a familiar figure emerged around the corner, an unsettling silhouette I had hoped never to encounter again. The thug who had threatened them, his presence shaking the very ground beneath my feet, loomed ahead, looking even more menacing than before. My heart dropped, fear wrapping around me like a vice. What are you doing here? He spat, menacingly narrowing his eyes. I felt the mother's grip tighten on her child as panic surged through our small group. I knew then that our struggle was far from over. A darker confrontation awaited us. The fight against fear was just beginning, and now, everything was at stake. I never expected that rescuing a beaten mother and her child would change my life forever. The air crackled with tension, a silent scream rising in my throat as fear simmered beneath the surface. The thug advanced, his gait oozing menace. Shadows danced around us, and for a moment, time hung suspended, a prelude to chaos. The little boy instinctively pressed closer to his mother, who shielded him with her frail frame, her courage visibly fraying. Back off, I said, my voice straining to hold firmness against my rising panic. The thug let out a low, guttural laugh that sent chills down my spine, the type of laughter that echoed of past violence. You think you can play hero? He sneered, his eyes glinting like shards of glass. You don't know what you're getting into, do you? Enough, the mother interjected, a fierceness igniting in her that surprised even me. We're leaving, and you won't stop us. Her voice trembled, but the heat of her refusal burned brighter than the fear that encased us. His smile flickered before transforming into a menacing snarl, and he took a step forward, closing the space between us. You think they'll help you? A washed-up nobody and a couple of misfits? You're still mine, lady. Always will be. I registered the raw desperation in her expression as the weight of the past pressed heavily on her shoulders. You're not alone, I said, though the words felt temporary in the face of undeniable dread. Fight with me. We'll figure something out. The little boy looked between us, confusion in his innocent eyes, as the thug drew even closer. Then, with a thrust of courage that left my heart pounding, the girl's voice rose above the tension, quaking yet unwavering. The love I have for my son is greater than any fear you can bring. The tremor of conviction cascaded through her declaration, and the thug paused, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. Just for a moment. Love? His laughter was sharp, bitter, echoing off the alley walls. Your love won't protect you. You think you can just leave with your little family? You think you're safe? And in that instant, with fate hanging by a thread, my resolve coiled tighter within me. Leave them alone, I yelled, stepping protectively in front of the woman and her child, my body shaking but unwilling to yield. You don't have to drag them back into hell. His dark eyes simmered with rage, and I prepared for the worst, wishing there was some escape route. With a sudden motion, he lunged at me, and the world plunged into chaos. Time unraveling like a frayed thread, we collided, and the impact jarred through my frame. But in the midst of that darkness, a miracle emerged. Sirens wailed in the distance, a promise of hope and authority that sent a ripple of fear through the thug and swallowed the resolve of the darkness around us. He veered back, flickering between options, then cursed under his breath before retreating down the alley. That I turned toward the mother, breathless, the fleeting moment of confrontation leaving my heart racing. Are you okay? I asked, but my words were submerged in emotion as I watched her face flicker through fear, gratitude, and residual doubt. She nodded slowly, though her eyes betrayed her. I don't know what we'll do next, she said, voice trapped between breaths. We can figure it out together, I assured her, my mind racing, the sirens growing louder. This moment felt like a reprieve, but clouds of uncertainty still loomed on the horizon. The boy's small hand found mine, a spark of connection igniting warmth in that cold alley. Will you be our friend, even if we are scared? He asked, his voice a whisper, like a fragile promise tethered to the unknown. Always, I replied, not fully convinced of the truth behind my words, but desperate to believe in the hope they inspired. Just then, the screeching tires of a police car rounded the corner, and instinct kicked in. We need to go, I shouted, urgency rushing through me. We'll be okay, but we have to move. The three of us scrambled deeper into the maze of alleyways, my heart pounding with the fear of being discovered again, but fueled by the fierce hope that lingered each step forward, a promise to protect them both. As we turned a corner, exhaustion threatened to pull me under, but I couldn't let the weight of despair claim us. Hope flickered, faint and fragile. We turned yet another corner, and then I stopped short. There, standing in the brighter streetlight, was the familiar figure of the woman who had filled our nights with laughter at the community center. I recognized the sparkle in her eyes, but as she noticed us, her expression shifted to one of alarm. What are you doing here? It's not safe. Before I could explain, the pounding of footsteps echoed ominously behind us, breaking the fragile peace we had carved out. Run, I shouted, adrenaline surging through me, and as we dashed into the unknown, I felt the pull of a deeper truth. Our struggles had only begun, and we were edging toward an uncertain future. The pounding of our feet echoed against the asphalt, each stride a desperate plea for safety. I led the way, glancing back toward the woman with a wild mix of fear and determination, the little boy clinging to her hand with a small fist like a lifeline. Where are we going? She gasped, and I could hear the tremor in her voice, a barely held thread that could snap under pressure. Just keep moving, I replied, trying to maintain a brave front despite the swirl of dread that knotted my stomach. We emerged into a wider street, the bare light from the lampposts offering little comfort against the looming uncertainty. Ahead, frosted windows revealed the glow of warmth and laughter spilling from a local diner. I had memories of sharing fries on a cold winter's night with friends there, caught up in stories that felt far from the reality we were living in now. My heart ached at the thought of using that same space for refuge, and yet it seemed like the only choice we had. Let's duck inside, I suggested, drawing them closer as my instincts flared. If only for a moment. It could be safe away from the shadows that hunted us. As we crossed the threshold, the small bell above the door jingled lightly, a curious note in the air that provided a brief moment of normalcy. The smell of greasy burgers and fresh coffee kissed our senses, a stark contrast to the adrenaline-fueled fear that had gripped us since we'd left the alley. We found a booth at the back, quickly sinking into the red vinyl seats. The woman's face was pale, and the boy's wide eyes darted around, uncertainty coloring every inch of his small frame. I could feel my own heart racing, each pulse a reminder that we were not yet safe. "They'll get us something to eat," I offered, hoping to steal a tiny moment of normalcy. Still, as I stood to approach the counter, a creeping sense of dread settled over me like a shroud. Behind the counter stood a familiar face, one that sparked a mixture of fear and disappointment. It was Janet, the diner's owner, and an acquaintance from my old Lithia life I was trying desperately to escape. Her brows knit together as she regarded us with a mix of concern and suspicion. "Are you all right?" she ventured cautiously, her voice low and careful. The recognition stirred memories of laughter, but now her gaze felt like a spotlight searching for the cracks within us. "That we just need a moment," I said, trying to sound casual despite the tension crawling beneath my skin. "Some food and warmth." The boy tugged at the hem of my shirt, a small whisper of need swelling inside the silence that filled the booth. All around us, customers paid little attention to our corner, yet there was an unmistakable presence of eyes watching, judging, and questioning. As I stood at the counter, Janet quietly passed me pancakes and coffee, wrapping her hand around mine for a moment as she leaned in with a frown. "You're not safe here, are you?" Her whisper cut through my mask of composure, an unspoken understanding passing between us. I drew a breath, battling the surge of emotions that mixed fear and gratitude, a dash of hope beneath the shadows of despair that I in that moment. The diner felt endless and small, encasing us in our shared storm. We were open yet vulnerable, exposed to the world outside but cocooned in this fragile bubble. With cautious gratitude, I returned to the booth, placing the steaming plates before the mother and son. "This is for you," I said, meeting her gaze, hoping the warmth of the food would ease her fear even if just a little. But the mother's eyes were filled with something deeper, a flicker of sorrow that told me she was haunted not only by her past, but by the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring. "Thank you," she whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for the fork. Beside her, the boy's cheeks flushed with excitement as he dug into the fluffy pancakes, a moment of joy amidst the chaos. Yet, just as a smile broke through, a crash echoed from outside, freezing the atmosphere in a brittle silence. My heart raced against my ribs, the fabric of my hope fraying as memories of the thug's threats flooded my mind. "What was that?" the boy asked, his voice small and shaken. "Just a noise," I replied, though uncertainty twisted in my gut. I dared a glance out the window, but the gritty world outside had shifted, a dark silhouette approaching the diner with undeniable intent. "That I think we might not be alone," I said, clenching my fists. The mother's face paled as she caught my gaze, a storm of fear and realization pooling in her dark eyes. The shadows drew near, and I could taste the fear thickening in the air. Something deep within me pushed back against despair, igniting sparks of defiance. We would not let the past swallow us whole, not today. But as the door swung open and the light flooding in cast ominous shapes, I braced for a confrontation that might shatter everything we had just begun to build. That I in that tumultuous moment, with faces hardening in anger and disbelief, I realized that freedom would come at a cost, and all of us would have to decide how much we were willing to pay. The air inside the diner chilled as the door swung open, bringing in a gust of murky night air that seemed to carry the very weight of our fears. A tall figure stepped into the light, silhouetted against the glow of neon diner's signature shadow that felt far too familiar. My pulse quickened as I fought to keep my expression neutral. My heart instinctively raced at the thought of what might come next. "Look who we have here," the figure sneered, his voice cutting through the warmth and laughter of the diner like a knife. It was Marco, one of the thugs I had hoped never to see again. The piercing eyes that met mine were marked by a disdainful recognition that sent chills down my spine. "Marco," I said, forcing the word through clenched teeth, trying to contain the flicker of fear threatening to consume me. Thought you could just run off and leave all your little problems behind? He taunted, stepping inside like he owned the place. The patrons shifted uncomfortably, their casual interest morphing into something apprehensive. My heart thrummed in my chest as I made a mental map, counting exits and plotting a way to shield the woman and her child. The mother's grip tightened around her son, her eyes wide with disbelief. She knew danger when she saw it, and I could feel her desperation mingling painfully with my own. "Get out," I snapped, my voice stronger than I felt. "You don't belong here. I've got every right to be where I want. Maybe I'm here for you. Maybe I'm just here to teach you that running away only makes it worse," he growled, taking a step closer. The tension in the air was palpable, and the once cheerful diner now felt like a courtroom where judgment loomed heavy over us. He laughed, a low rumble that echoed against the walls like thunder. "You think you can protect them? They'll get hurt because of you, just like you did to everyone else." I felt the heat of shame burn under my skin, an electric jolt of past mistakes rearing to life. But just as the darkness threatened to swallow me, the woman beside me drew in a breath. Her shoulders squared as she shifted to face Marco. "Leave them alone," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're nothing but a coward." Marco's smirk faded, replaced by a glimmer of rage. The diner felt eerily silent, tension crackling like static. A soft weeping sound broke through the air as her son curled closer, sensing the storm brewing, seeking the safety of his mother's embrace. "Coward? Is that what you think?" He spat out, taking another step forward. The chime of the door slamming shut behind him echoed ominously. "You think sticking up for a useless mess makes you strong?" "Enough," I said, forcing every ounce of courage into those syllables. "You don't scare us." The waitress at the counter, eyes wide and trembling, slowly reached for her phone, but Marco caught the glance, eyes narrowing into slits. "If anyone calls the police, it'd be a shame if something," he paused, savoring the thick air, "happened to them." Tension snapped between us, and I caught the woman's eye. The storm that brewed around us pressed harder, but within her gaze flickered flashes of hope, recognition that we were not alone, that we could face this together. With a sudden determination I didn't know I possessed, I stood taller. "Let's go." I turned to the woman and her son, steeling my resolve. "We have to leave now." The mother's expression shifted from fear to fierce acceptance, the embers of defiance igniting in her eyes. She nodded, gripping her boy tightly, as we made our way toward the back of the diner. But Marco stepped into our path, unyielding and dangerous, a predator who had cornered his prey. "You think you can just waltz out of here?" "Not a chance." In a moment of chaotic movement, I felt adrenaline rush through me, fueling my actions. I pushed the mother and child towards the exit, my fists clenched at my sides. The diner felt oddly still, as if the entire universe held its breath in anticipation. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen. One of the cooks had dropped a stack of plates, and the ensuing chaos caused everyone to panic and shift. In that split second, I seized the moment. "This way now," I shouted, urgency spilling from my voice as I led them to the kitchen door. But as we darted through the thinning crowd, Marco lunged, fingers gripping my shoulder with surprising strength. I felt the heat of his breath, the tendrils of fear intertwining with my resolve. "Run, run," I yelled back to the mother, shoving her forward into the kitchen. She didn't hesitate. She knew that we were all racing against time, against something that felt insurmountable. The clatter of chaos faded as I struggled against Marco's grip, daring to glance back over my shoulder. In that moment, amidst the chaos, I saw something I hadn't anticipated. Janet, the diner owner, stood defiantly at the register, her arms crossed and eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness. "You leave them be, Marco. They're not yours to ruin." Hope swelled in my chest, mingling with the fear tightening my throat. Could it be that we might have allies in this fight? But just as I turned back to face the exit, the back door nailed shut behind us crashed open, revealing a grim figure silhouetted against the heavy streetlight. My heart dropped as I recognized the dark, menacing presence. The shadows were closing in, and this was only the beginning of a fight that had just begun. The stakes were higher, and now, as realization dawned, I understood that everything we fought for was about to unfold in ways we never imagined. And I would have to decide, with every step we took into the unknown, just how far I was willing to go to protect the man myself. The kitchen was a whirlwind of frantic movement and chaos, the smell of grease mingling with the tension that hung heavy in the air. I could hear the muffled sound of the diner's patrons in the main area, their startled murmurs punctuated by Marco's angry shouts behind me. My instincts fired on all cylinders, propelling me to steer the mother and her son through the narrow passage of the kitchen. "Stay close," I urged, constantly glancing back to ensure they were right behind me. The woman's face was pale, but her lips pressed tightly together in determination. That spark of defiance fueled my resolve as I dashed past the fryers and stacks of gleaming pots, each obstacle a reminder of the tight confines of our reality. Then, the mother gasped, a sound that shattered my focus. I turned just in time to see her freeze, eyes wide at the sight of the looming frame of the kitchen manager, Tony. His face paled when he spotted us and the commotion behind. "Help us!" I shouted, my voice cracking. I had never been particularly good at asking for help. It felt almost foreign to me, but desperation drove me. Instead of the support I expected, Tony narrowed his eyes, the weight of decisions pulling at his brow. "I can't get involved with this, it's dangerous." "Dangerous? What's more dangerous than letting him catch us here?" I shot back, the urgency twisting my gut into knots. My heart raced at the thought of Marco bursting through the kitchen doors, a marauding bull aimed at us. But then I caught sight of the mother, determination coursing through her as she stepped closer to Tony, her voice steady but urgent. "You may think protecting yourself is what matters now, but that will change. What he'll do to us is worse than any fight you think you want to avoid." Something flickered in Tony's eyes, then perhaps recognition. He glanced between us, and I had a sudden, fleeting hope that maybe he would realize that our battle was his too. "Fine," he grumbled finally, his shoulders sagging as if he had made up his mind despite the fear clinging to him. "But you have to go out the back, and you need to be quick." I wasted no time. "Thank you," I said, a mix of gratitude and anxiety spilling over. "We won't forget this." Without further words, we hurried toward the back door, shadows shifting against the dimly lit walls. But just as Tony swung the door open to reveal an alleyway bathed in moonlight, the siren of police cars echoed in the distance. The sound sliced through me, a warning bell that wrapped itself around my chest, constricting my breath. I could hear Marco bellowing behind us, his voice a guttural roar almost drowned out by the wailing sirens. "Go," I urged, pushing the mother and son ahead of me. They didn't need convincing. The look of terror in their eyes propelled them to scramble through the opening. But the moment my foot hit the pavement outside, panic surged anew. The alley was narrow and dimly lit, littered with debris that crunched beneath my feet. We had no clear path, no set direction. I turned back to find Marco closing in fast, shadows flickering against him ominously. The world felt unbearably small, as if it were collapsing in on us. "Where do we go?" the mother cried, panic rising in her voice as she glanced down the alley. Uncertainty etched across her features. "Anywhere but here," I shouted back, but even I didn't have a plan. The tattoo of footsteps echoed in the distance, urgency surging in my veins. Then an unexpected kindness bloomed in the chaos. A door swung open behind me, the familiar figure of Miss Betty, a local woman who ran the community center. Her eyes darted about, instantly assessing the situation with unparalleled clarity. "Here," she called, waving for us to enter. "Hurry, before they see you." We exchanged quick glances, the unspoken connection growing even in this moment of turmoil. There was no time to weigh the risks. We jumped inside, her door slamming shut behind us. The dim light flickered overhead, and the air felt thick, heavy with the scent of dust and worn-out fabric. "Stay down," Miss Betty whispered sharply, ushering us toward a narrow hallway filled with old books and sports equipment. It was a sanctuary, a promised pause amid the madness. As we huddled together, listening to the distant sounds of chaos brewing outside, my heart hammered against my ribs. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, the unyielding burden of past choices and the unending fear for the future. But in that dim hallway, as the mother whispered reassuring words to her child, I felt an ember of hope ignite again. We weren't entirely alone. As strange as this journey had been, we had gathered strength through these connections, renegotiating our shared fate. However, the door rattled violently, as someone pounded against it from the outside. "I know you're in there. Let her go? Open up." Marco's infuriated voice cut through the stillness like glass shattering, and my heart dropped. "Please," I breathed, staring wide-eyed at Miss Betty, who was poised like a sentinel. "What do we do?" I felt the weight of every choice hanging in the balance. As reality dawned, I realized that whatever happened next would irrevocably change each of our lives forever. The door shuttered again, splinters of wood splintering off with a sharp crack as Marco's fury pressed against it with relentless force. I could feel the palpable energy of fear and desperation swirling around us like a storm, and I steeled myself against the chaos, as though doing so could somehow bolster our fragile bubble of safety. Miss Betty placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, her eyes filled with fierce determination. "We can't stay here. Hell break through eventually." Her voice was calm, yet urgent, like the eye of a hurricane poised to unleash its fury. "What do we do?" I murmured, my breath hitching in my throat. "We have to find another exit," she said, motioning downward. "There's a basement that leads to the back of the building. We can slip out that way." The realization flickered like lightning in my mind. Here was another chance to escape the storm, to reclaim control. But as we scurried toward the back, I caught a glimpse of the mother's frightened expression, her son clinging tightly to her leg. I wanted to promise them that everything would be all right, but the uncertainty clawed at my throat. "Let's move, now," I urged, guiding them through the hallway and down the narrow staircase that led to the basement. Each step echoed in the stillness, a reminder that time was slipping away like sand through our fingers. Once in the basement, the air felt cooler and musty, carrying the scent of earth and forgotten memories. I hesitated, straining to listen to the cacophony above us. Marco's relentless shouts melded with the sirens, replacing the cacophony of my heartbeat with urgency. Miss Betty moved swiftly, her movements confident as she urged us toward the back door, a heavy steel structure that looked like it had endured more than its fair share of wear and tear. "We need to be quiet. He shouldn't know we're here," she instructed, her eyes darting toward the slightly ajar door. As we reached it, hope battled with fear in my chest, melding together into something both exhilarating and terrifying. The door creaked as we pushed gently, the sound painfully loud in the tense silence. I paused for a moment, glancing back at the mother. "Are you ready?" I asked, trying to project strength even as the weight of doubt obscured my vision. She nodded, but the shadow of uncertainty danced in her eyes, and I felt an aching need to reassure her. "We will get through this together." With resolved intent, Miss Betty opened the door fully, revealing a sliver of moonlight that illuminated the narrow alley behind the community center. We stepped outside cautiously, exchanging quick glances as we emerged into the cool air, still low to the ground like shadows slipping away from danger. Just as we maneuvered into the alley, another loud crash roared above us, rattling the building. My heart skipped a beat. Marco's fury had boiled over. He was desperate now. "Run!" I shouted as a cloud of fear swept over us. Adrenaline surged as we sprinted down the dim alley, breath hitching in our throats. The night felt alive, full of threats lurking just beyond the shadows. Around the corner, we spotted a clearing leading into the bustling street, filled with night owls and late-night wanderers oblivious to our plight. Though the prospect of safety dazzled us like a beacon, I could hear Marco's voice grow closer behind us, a guttural growl of anger that sought to shatter our escape. As we emerged from the alley, the sudden gust of noise enveloped us, but my heart was still back in the alley with the mother and her child, battling the storm brewing behind us. Just as we thought we could blend into the crowd, the weight of Marco's rage slammed down on us. "Stop her!" he bellowed, and I felt the collective gasp of people around us, their heads turning with curiosity edged with alarm. Without thinking, I grasped the mother's hand tightly, urging her toward a nearby diner busy with patrons. "In here. Stay close," I called, seemingly a faint echo against the wall of chaos that Marco had unleashed. The mother clutched her son's hand, fear rendered raw in her eyes. But she held on to a persistent flicker of hope, and I knew that we had to protect that spark, our sole weapon in a world that felt overwhelmingly hostile. Just as we reached the door of the diner, I felt a jolt, a sudden embrace of something that turned my stomach into knots. The air thickened with tension, and the realization hit me like a tidal wave. What if he finds us here? I turned back, searching for the shadow of danger in the pulse of chaos unraveling behind us. Instead of responding to my unspoken fears, Miss Betty turned to me, the weight of her gaze heavy with something unnameable. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice low but urgent, just above the thrum of the crowd around us. "What?" I asked, feeling my heartbeat thunder in my ears. But before she could answer, the door behind us burst open, and Marco stood there, unyielding and wild, a tempest in human form. The diner fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on us like a force of nature. Then Miss Betty's words escaped like whispers lost to the wind, and the last flicker of hope flickered against the growing storm. In a moment that felt infinite, hope intertwined with terror, leaving a dangerous and uncertain quiet, pregnant with possibility. And just as Marco's enraged gaze locked onto us, I realized that our journey was far from over. This moment would irrevocably define us all, in ways I could never have predicted. The diner was suddenly suffocating, a small world turned upside down by Marco's anger spilling over the threshold. The patrons' eyes darted between their plates and the commotion outside, drawn to the brewing storm but unwilling to confront it. Tension coiled in my stomach as I stood frozen, my heart pounding like a warning bell. "Get away from her," I shouted, instilling every ounce of courage I had in my voice, hoping it would somehow anchor us in this moment. Miss Betty's eyes widened in surprise at my defiance, but I knew it was our only chance to hold the storm at bay, even for a heartbeat longer. Marco stepped inside, his presence darkening the entryway. "Let her go, loser," he barked, voice dripping with disdain. He scanned the room, a predator searching for weak prey, and I felt the air thick with his menacing energy. I instinctively stepped forward, placing myself between the mother and Marco, a futile shield against a raging tide. "You don't want to do this," I pleaded, forcing my voice steady even as panic clawed at my insides. I glanced back at the mother, who clutched her son tightly, emerging from her frightened stupor as the urgency of our situation crystallized. "Please," she murmured, her voice almost lost in the din of unsteady breaths around us. The protective love in her eyes was matched by a glimpse of steely determination. This was not just about her, Anna Maria, it was about us all. Marco scoffed. "You think you can stand in my way? He'll take what's mine. You can't save her." His bullying confidence crashed against the fragile wall surrounding us. Yet behind him, I sensed the hesitation flickering among the onlookers, like sparks searching for a flame. "Someone should help." Someone in the diner finally shouted from the far corner, a shaky voice dissolving the spell of silence. It was as if those words opened the floodgates. Heads began to nod in silent agreement, murmurs of solidarity rippling through the previously silent crowd. But as if sensing the dissent gathering strength, Marco's expression twisted further into fury. "Stay out of this," he screamed, his eyes narrowing as he took a step closer. "Enough." A new voice echoed from the diner's kitchen, and suddenly a figure emerged, an older gentleman, silver-haired and solid, his apron stained, but holding the authority of someone used to commanding attention. "Marco," the man said, voice carrying weight, "this isn't the place for your games." Frozen by surprise, Marco cast a furious glance at the newcomer before visibly recalibrating to meet this unexpected challenge. "Get out of my way, Clyde." But Clyde did not back down. "You have no idea who you're messing with. This isn't how you handle your problems. Leave now, or I'll call the police." The air crackled around us. I could feel the shift brewing not only within the diner, but within myself, this small taste of rebellion, this unexpected courage rooting deeper into my chest, filling the hollow with bonds that could either save or break us. I seized the moment, pressing the mother's hand firmly in mine. "We have to go now," I whispered urgently, pulling her, willing her to follow my lead. As Marco's attention divided, I caught a glimpse of the path toward the back, the exit leading away from the fury brewing up front. Miss Betty moved beside us, and her reassuring presence became a stone against the torrential winds. "Stay close," she commanded, and I felt her strength bolster my resolve. We slipped toward the back of the diner while the scene unfolded, a tempest, but a harbor nonetheless. As we neared the door, I heard Marcos roar, a tumult of sound drowning out the world, and just as we reached the exit, the doorframe shadow loomed larger. Then, just as we slipped into the alley on the other side of the diner, I heard the sound of plastic shriek as Clyde held his phone aloft. It's too late for you, Marco. The cops are on their way. The moment hung in the air, a frozen second that felt both liberating and imprisoning. We were still here, but would it be long before the storm chased us down again? Breathless, I turned to the mother, whose eyes brimmed with a mixture of gratitude and lingering despair. We have to keep moving, she urged, her voice stronger now. But in the distance, the unmistakable howl of sirens shook the air, a promise of arriving aid mixed with the certainty that our danger was far from over. As we fled down the alley, I felt the tightening knot of destiny drawing us closer. I had stepped into the storm with fresh resolve, but the path forward whispered of unseen cracks in the fragile ground where trust and safety once stood. And then, as if conjured by the chaos chasing us, I heard a voice on the wind, soft yet cutting. You think running will save you? My heart sank. A voice that could only belong to Marco echoed behind me, his rage reverberating through the ground beneath. We were merely fragments in this storm, desperately searching for our safe haven, and with shadows closing in, I knew I had to face the turmoil brewing in the depths of both our lives and the choices we had yet to make. The sirens wailed in the distance, and every echo seemed to trap us in the alley's cramped confines. The dim light pushed against the encroaching shadows, casting flickering silhouettes that danced around me. A cruel reminder that chaos was never far behind. Where do we go now? I gasped, urgency propelling my words into the night. The mother's face was a tableau of fear and fierce determination, her son nestled against her leg, his wide eyes filled with a question far too heavy for his young heart. Just anywhere but here, she stammered, her voice cracking, yet somehow resolute. We need to find a safe place. Please. I nodded, urgency fueling my movements as I glanced around the alley, searching for a sanctuary amidst the grime. The cold air nipped at my skin, and the reality of our precarious situation settled heavily on my shoulders. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum, a reminder that time was slipping away. Come on, Miss Betty urged from behind me, her eyes scanning the alley, her presence my tether to courage amidst the crisis. There's a park just 2 blocks over. We can hide there until the police arrive. Holding the mother's gaze, I let out a shaky breath. We can do that. We'll be safe until help comes. In that moment, a flicker of hope threaded through the thick tension. I clenched my fist, resolved to seize the chance to protect them both. We took off, a ragtag group bolting into the night, the urgency pulling us forward. As we reached the intersection, my heart raced and my thoughts spiraled. I could still feel the weight of Marco's threat hanging in the air, and it clawed at the edges of my mind, an incessant whisper that warned me our connection with danger was far from severed. A glance over my shoulder caught a glimpse of Clyde stepping outside the diner, phone still raised, his shout mingling with the sirens. Marco was coming, and the hunt was on. We have to move faster, I urged, veering into the safety of the shadowed streets. Trees loomed ahead, casting long shadows like guardians stretching out their arms to protect us. The park could be our sanctuary, a place to catch our breath, at least for a moment. Just as we turned a corner, I felt a creeping sensation pressing against my back as though the very air was infused with danger. Hearing a scuffle behind me, I froze momentarily. Anxiety rippled through the mother, as she instinctively pulled her son closer. Don't look back, I said, the words tumbling out in desperation. But curiosity mingled with fear, a perilous mix that had me turning slightly. Just for a moment, I wanted to see if the storm was gaining. Then I saw him, Marco's silhouette cutting through the fog of the streetlights, fury radiating like a dark halo around him. Even from a distance, I could feel the heat of his rage as he barreled forward, eyes locked on us with a singular and furious purpose. Run, I yelled, launching myself forward into the park, the others scrambling behind me like shadows cast in sudden light. The park loomed large with vast trees and thick bushes, a tangle of branches that promised concealment. Still, my heart pounded with dread as we burst into the open space, surrounded by the faint rustling of leaves, a stark contrast to the ferocity behind us. Breathless, we ducked behind an enormous oak, its bark rough under my fingertips as I tried to steady my racing heart. I peered around the trunk, adrenaline coursing, half expecting to see Marco barrel into the clearing, a storm ready to break. Why is he so angry? The boy's voice emerged, small and trembling. The innocence in his inquiry cracked through the night like a dim light breaking through the shadows. The mother bit her lip, anguish swirling in her eyes. People like him, they don't understand the love a family can bring. They're filled with their own hurt, she whispered, and the raw truth of her words wrapped around us all. Before I could respond, more sirens echoed in the distance, cloaking the air with a layered hope, yet I felt a tension build that felt insurmountable. A moment passed in anxious silence, and as I stole another glance around the tree, I caught a flicker of movement. Marco's figure appeared at the edge of the park, his anger palpable even from afar. But he didn't come alone. Shadows flanked him, friends, accomplices, a pack of familiar faces from the diner, emboldened to stand at his side. What was once a solitary fury now pulsed with strength, a swarm of threats moving in concert, accelerating darkness in stark contrast to our fragile bond of hope. "Stay behind me," I commanded, chest tightening. Miss Betty nodded, stepping forward defiantly, her determination carving fierce lines of resolve in her weathered face. I am not sure what transpired in that moment, a weave of courage and fear stitching us all tighter together, but then came the softness of a rescue, a most unexpected kindness. Just then, a woman darted from out of the shadows, a stranger who, instinctively, seemed to understand our plight. She called out, her voice steady as she neared us. "Over here. This way." But as we moved toward her, panic surged as a shout echoed from Marco's side, his bellow tearing through the turmoil. "You think you can hide? You can't escape what's coming." We were caught at a crossroads, the dawn of potential respite on one side versus the looming storm on the other. Tension mounted around us like an approaching tempest, and I felt every pulse of my heart anticipating what awaited. Then, just before we could reach the benevolent stranger, reality hit like a hammer, a shockwave of revelation uncoiling like a serpent through the air that whispered secrets hidden until now. "Don't make me do this," Marco's voice thundered, followed by the unmistakable crack of a stick beneath his foot. "You know where you stand with me, and if you think you can take her away from me, you're wrong." Tension thickened, and in that flicker of a heartbeat, I realized we were standing on the precipice of conflict that could shatter us all. Would kindness save us? Or was the storm simply a harbinger of deeper battles yet to be fought? Time held its breath, the world paused on its axis, and I stood there, poised for both the light and the darkness, uncertain of what my next step would bring. The park was a twisted maze of light and shadow, every corner feeling alive with the weight of unspoken fears. I pressed myself against the old oak, heart racing as the impending storm threatened to eclipse us once more. Panic gnawed at my insides, but the small hand of the boy squeezed mine, his innocent warmth grounding me amid the chaos. "Please, don't let them take us," he whispered, voice trembling. The mother's gaze, filled with both despair and determination, pierced through the murky dark that surrounded us. "It's going to be okay," I managed, though I could feel my own resolve wavering. It was a feeble reassurance in the face of Marco's approaching wrath, yet I held tightly to the flicker of hope binding us together. But then, like an impending wave crashing down, Marco's gaze locked onto ours. The increase in footsteps echoed through the trees, disrupting the tranquil silence of the night. I felt terror cascade through me, knowing we needed to act quickly. I scanned the park, desperately searching for an escape route, while keeping my grip on the little boy's hand. "No one leaves," Marco shouted, his voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. I could see his silhouette rippling with rage as he signaled for his crew to spread out, corners of the park suddenly feeling more suffocating than before. "You think hiding will save you? You think they'll help?" The burdens of silence wrapped around us, and I turned back to the mother. To shield her and her son felt like the only purpose I had left. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "There's a way out this way, trust me." I pointed toward a shadowed exit at the far end of the park, almost hidden behind the thickening branches. Just as I was about to lead them, a rustle jolted the air. From the trees emerged not just Marco's thugs, but a group of familiar faces, people I thought had long since faded from my life. They wore expressions of disbelief, solidarity gleaming in their eyes as they formed a barrier between us and the approaching danger. "Get behind us," one shouted out, a face I recognized from old ties to my past, a figure I had never expected to see again. The realization crashed over me like a wave. There was strength in unity. These people had come back, and in that moment, I felt the gravity of hope settling into a fierce warmth. But Marco wasn't having any of it. You really think you can shield them from me? His anger boiled over, and he lunged toward the mother, eyes wild. Get down! I yelled as everything moved in slow motion. I lunged forward, mirroring an instinct born from desperation, darting past the barrier of protection and throwing myself against him in a frenzy of bodies colliding. The force knocked us both back, the world spinning around us like a cyclone. I could hear the mother's screams, and in that cacophony of sound, I felt something shift inside me, a certainty that grew with each heartbeat. We were fighting not just for their lives, but for something I had long buried within my own chest, a hope for a world where love could exist unfettered by violence. As we grappled on the ground, my surroundings began to blur. Shouts were now muffled, and the chaos of the night seemed to fade away. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, as if everything around us had reached a boiling point. Then, I heard her voice. Stop! It broke through the tumult, sharp and unwavering, as the mother's plea ricocheted through our fight. Both Marco and I froze for a beat, astonished at the strength woven tightly through her words. You're better than this. We can all be better. I could feel her fierce determination swelling in the air. It was palpable. Marco hesitated, caught off guard, and in that flash of uncertainty, my heart surged. It's not worth it, I shouted, adrenaline pulsing through my veins. You're chained to your anger, but the only way to be free is to let go of this hate. In an unexpected twist, Marco's eyes flickered with confusion, emotions spiraling in that fleeting silence. The shadows of anger that had been his constant companions suddenly seemed to tremble. A momentary break in the storm. Listen to her, I urged, pushing forward. Let go of the past. Walk away from this. It doesn't define you. I could feel time suspending around us. The tension carried a strange weight, neither battle nor surrender, but something entirely distinct. But as he grappled with the rising tide of his own inner conflict, I noticed the mother moving slowly toward us. Her small frame became a beacon amidst the chaos. Determination radiated from her every step, and I saw the light inside her. Marco looked from her to me, and for the first time, I felt the battle brewing within him. The storm was still there, but beneath it, another choice lingered, one he could take. And then, the sirens grew louder, a cacophony of light breaking into the dark night. It was a last call for reflection, for decisions that had long been overdue. I saw panic slice across Marco's face at the sound, and he stepped back, uncertainty clouding his features. What will you do? She whispered, and it was a question that roared louder than any anger could answer. Mouth tightening, Marco could feel the weight of our collective gaze, pursuit of anger teetering on the brink of something wiser. For a moment, he seemed lost. The fight in him ebbed away as the reflective whisper of restraint nudged him, just enough to disrupt the storm. Then, in a heartbeat, something cracked. The hardness softened in his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, a glimpse of emotion emerged. Pain, perhaps a lifetime of hurt spilling onto the pavement, and resentment began to shatter. Run, he murmured almost to himself, voice hoarse. Just run. And with those words, a light flickered, a decision made not by violence, but by a quiet whisper of acceptance, a somber acknowledgement that perhaps we could all pursue something better. As we moved silently past him, the weight of the night began to lift like fog, rediscovering warmth from the sun. We slipped into the safety of the park, leaving Marco standing there, paradox crumbling behind him as the sirens wailed closer, wrought with the promise of tomorrow. The air felt clearer, like the world had shed a fragile layer of suffering. Together, we stepped into something more powerful than despair, a bond woven together by resilience, rooted deeply in love, hope, and the fleeting breath of forgiveness. As we stood there, holding tightly to one another, I realized that the story of our lives ran deeper than the battles we were left to fight. In the remnants of that dark night, we found strength, hope, and a flicker of light guiding us toward a future, a future filled with possibility. In the tender embrace of resolve, I held on to the warmth of their hands and felt the weight of this momentous journey, not merely about survival, but one that spoke of redemption. I had opened my heart with an earnest desire to protect, and in turn, discovered the power of connection, of forgiveness born not from the absence of pain, but from the acceptance that love could rise from even the darkest shadows. The night stretched before us, an uncharted journey awaiting our footsteps, and in that silent understanding shared between us, an echo of truth began to blossom. As we drew closer to the dawn, the hope of a new beginning, I whispered into the night, "No matter what happens, we will find our way home together." And that, in the grand tapestry of life, became the light guiding me through the darkness, its glow illuminating the pages of tomorrow.